With Willa. I am your host, Willa White, and this is my weekly podcast show that airs on Wednesday mornings at 10 a.m. Eastern on my Facebook page, Willa White Medium. This also goes out on the Lilydale Assembly page as well as my YouTube channel. And if you want the listen only feature, you can tune in on blogtalkradio.com/Lilydale Radio. This is an opportunity for me and my special guests to have a spiritual conversation regarding spiritualism, mediumship, healing, faith, family, or more. And I've been doing shows for many years now. This, in fact, is year 7 of Wednesdays with Willa. So there are lots of archive videos that you can look back and enjoy all of the guests, all the topics that we've covered throughout the years. And I encourage you to type in Willa White Medium and a certain guest name, and you'll be able to find the videos and watch them again if you're on YouTube or on Facebook. And a lot of topics throughout the years regarding mediumship and wonderful guests that have been on the show. So definitely tune in each week, but also know that you have the option of binge watching later. A lot of people tell me they do that. I want to also mention that Lilydale Assembly is taking donations this time of year. So don't forget that you can certainly share the gift with Lilydale, and know that your donation really does help the organization to continue and to be able to support the programming that we do and other events that are so important to the religion, philosophy, and science of spiritualism. So you can find more information about that on the Lilydale Assembly website. And I am really excited to have this special guest on the show today, Randy Kerman. Thanks for being on the show today, Randy.
Oh, my pleasure. Glad to join you.
Absolutely. It's always good to connect with you and have a good chat. And today we're going to be focusing on a topic near and dear to your heart, Hannukah. And we'll be talking about spiritualism and the Festival of Lights. For those of you who don't know who Randy Kerman is, Randy is a spiritualist minister, as well as being a board member of the Lilydale Assembly. And he's been raised in the Jewish tradition and really brings a lot to the discussion, such as this, and in terms of merging Judaism and spiritualism and finding those connection points and really sharing with folks, especially with Hannukah being tomorrow. I thought it would be great to have you on the show and to highlight some of the important aspects of that religion, but also what we can do if we want to just celebrate the light as well in our lives. So I'm really excited to have you share with us today.
Absolutely. Looking forward to discussing with you any of the questions that you have and some enlightenment and hopefully, no pun intended, enlightening.
Every pun intended.
Every
Right?
pun intended.
Every pun intended.
You know me well.
Yes, exactly.
We should state that we're sort of neighbors in Lilydale as well.
We are.
You
We're
live
on the
full
same
time,
street.
but we live part time there. But
Yeah.
yes,
Just down the street. And
just down the
it's
street.
lovely to know that you and your wife are part of spiritualism and doing what you can to support that as well. We really appreciate that. And I know in terms of Judaism and being raised in that tradition, you've had the opportunity to really balance out spiritualism and Judaism within your own life. Everybody has to find that uniquely when they come from a different religious background initially. And I can't wait to have you share those points. But should we go ahead and get started with Hannukah and
Yeah, let's
what
start with
what's that about? Because some people may have some understanding. I mean, everybody knows there's a menorah, everybody knows there's the lighting of it, but there is a particular sweetness to this particular this unique tradition.
Yeah, so
So
let's start first of all a little bit. You mentioned the menorah. Menorah is like a candelabra. At Hanukkah, there's a special one. It's called a Hannukah, and it's a little different because it has the 8 plus the 1 that's raised usually. So there's 9 candles on there. So all Hanukkahs are menorahs, but not all menorahs are Hanukkahs. So just to get that sort of difference in there. So let's sort of start with let's start with the traditions, some of the traditions, and then we'll get into how the holiday came to be the way it is. So traditions are there's a theme around oil because of the oil. You go back several thousand years ago, there wasn't wax in wicks. Oil was burned in lighting sources. So the sweetness comes in is that we do a lot of things that are fried in oil. So there's a Yiddish term, a Jewish term, basically the donuts that are deep fried in oil. And yes, you usually fill them with something and something sweet like jams, or more recently is Nutella and those types of things. So we also make potato pancakes, which are called ladkas, and there's a million different ways that people will argue the best way of making ladkas, from grated to shredded to with extra ingredients or just the potatoes. So we have some family stories about latkas. The correct pronunciation is latkas, not lackeys. Where the daughter come home from school, the teacher insisted it was lackeys, and my daughter said, and one of the fellow students said, "She's Jewish. I think she knows what she's talking about," meaning my daughter. So there's a little fun stories about that. So why the oil? I'll get to that. So when the Romans conquered Jerusalem, they damaged the temple and desecrated the temple. When the Maccabees and the Jews were able to recover and take over the temple again, they went to in our temples, like a lot of places, we have an eternal light, a light that's on all the time, usually over the ark of our Torahs is usually where it is. So there's usually a candelabra that's or a menorah that's lit all the time. Mm-hmm. When they went to relight it, so here's where there's a controversy of stories. There wasn't enough oil to last the time to either make new sacred oil or to go travel and return with the sacred oil. So there's some say that it was the time to go to another place and get the sacred oil, and others say it was a time to purify and make the oil. Either one it's irrelevant to which one it was. To the story was that there was enough oil for the light for one day, but the oil miraculously lasted and kept the light going for 8 days until there was more oil. So how the oil got there is irrelevant. It was that it lasted for those 8 days, and hence Hannukah is a festival and a holiday that we honor for those 8 days. So some of the things that happen in those. So on the Hannukah, you will find a spot for 8 candles on one level, and there's usually one that's at a higher level, and I'll get to that in just a moment. We start by lighting 1 candle each the first night, then 2 the second, 3 etc. So that by the 8th night, you have all 8 candles lit. So what's the 9th one? The 9th one is called the Shema, the Shamash. The Shamash. It's used for lighting the other candles. So you light that one with a match or a method of lighting it, and then you use that one to light the candles rather than a match or something for each one. And a kosher Hannukah, because you'll find ones that aren't on the same level, but to be a proper one, they should all be at the same level, except for the one that you use for lighting, because it has a higher calling for lighting the candles.
Yeah, I've heard that one in the center that you light the other candles with is called the servant candle.
Yes.
And I love that term, that this one is the servant, and yet it's higher.
Yes, because it has a higher function than the other one.
Mm-hmm.
It's not always in the center. For the traditional type, it is. Sometimes it's on the end, one end or the other. So it's and then there's arguments of whether you start from left to lighting from left to right. No, do you start the candles in at the left, going to left to right, or do you go right to left? Because in Judaism, the reading is from right to left,
right.
The opposite to the most of the rest of the world. Not all the world, because I think Chinese go up and down. Anyways, or Japanese. But so there's argument whether you put the candles in, like starting with 1, 2, 3. Do you start from left to right, and then do you light them from right to left or left to right? And
who's left and who's right? Is it?
Well, you go to one rabbi, you'll get one answer. You go to another, you get another. There's an old saying that if there's two Jews in a room having an argument, there's four opinions, because they could never come to a common thing. And you've seen that sort of brought out in different movies sometimes, the idea of the different opinions of things. We just rewatched the movie World War Z, and the when he goes to Jerusalem, he asks him, "Why did you know about this?" And he talks about the 10th man, and he talks about how if 9 all agree on something, then the 10th man has to take the opposite view and try to prove them wrong. And it actually brings up a very good point that sort of will tie the spiritualism and Judaism together. Judaism is a religion of challenge and debate and questioning, unlike some other monolithic religions where it's do as we say and don't question. Judaism is always up for debate. A lot of our texts, ancient texts, and that are opinions of rabbis in the differencing of opinions. Mm-hmm. So that's why there's no set defined, was the miracle for this or for this? Do you light the candles this way or this way? And you'll find that in a lot of our holidays and a lot of our traditions, there's debates of which way that things are. And it leads you to challenge the norm and challenge the expectation. And I think that in my growing up, I've seen things like what is tradition and what is what's the right word? What is law or what is expectations, etc. And we the best story I've ever heard that goes with that. I like stories. It's Shabbat dinner. Mom's getting ready to make Shabbat dinner, the Sabbath dinner on the Friday night, and the little girl, her little daughter's watching her, and she cuts a little bit of the end off of each end of the roast before she puts it in the pan. And the girl asks her mother, "Why do you do that?" She goes, "I've done it all my life. Why don't you go ask your grandmother?" So she goes and asks her grandmother, and her grandmother says, "Oh, I've done it all my life. Your great grandmother's in the other room. Why don't you go ask her why we do it?" So she goes to her great grandmother, and leave the Yiddish out of this. And she goes to her great grandmother, and her great grandmother says, "Why do we always cut the little bit off the end of the roast?" And the great grandmother says, "I don't know why everybody else does it, but I did it because the roast was always too big for the pan." So
there you go. There you go.
What is tradition and what is law and things that we have to do? And I should stress for people who may not know as much about Judaism, there's 3 main streams of Judaism. There is the Orthodox, which are and even within them, there's different levels. There's the ultra-Orthodox, who, for the people who want to know, those are the people that wear the black hats and have the curly hair and the long beards, and traditionally wear black. Then there's the conservative, which is sort of like a middle ground, and then there's reform. Reform, even around the world in different places, has different levels within it. But reform would be the most forward-thinking, I would say, or the more you take of Judaism what you choose to accept. Versus Orthodox is there's no debating it. This is what the Rebbe says. This is what the book says. This is what you do. And so I quite often get asked, how did the differences occur? Well, Judaism, and something that Catholicism didn't take from Judaism has always had a method to change things. So even though it came down from supposedly from a superior being, from God, the God of your choice, that there was rules and things to follow, there was a mechanism built into it that said sometimes when you're in a different country, when you're in a different place, you have to change. Sometimes you have to change things. So somewhere around 300 to 400 years ago, a group of Jews said, or a group of rabbis, Jewish rabbis said, "No more change. We're leaving things the way they are. No more future change." So hence you have what are now our ultra-Orthodox, who have, in the secular world now, they tend to live together and work together because they want to adhere and keep the way they are. they and the rest of Jews are not out to get other people to convert to Judaism. They just want to be left, not necessarily left alone, because they do interact with the secular world. So there's those three areas of Judaism. I was raised on the Reform, but when I got married and started my own family, I joined a synagogue that was probably very leaning towards the conservative end of things, but still a little more liberal. So that's why I don't wear a head covering all the time. That's why I get to choose. And I sort of explain this. If there was a list of 100 things that make you Jewish, Reform gets to say, you pick and choose which of those you wish to, because I was just discussing this with someone this week. They talk about the 10 commandments, but Jews were actually given 613 what they call mitzvot, or commandments. Some of them are things to do, and some of them are things not to do. But the 10 commandments that people refer to probably would be the top 10 if you make a top 10 list, which has become very popular. So in all of those commandments, none are listed as more important than others. So I don't struggle with, if I choose to drive on the Sabbath, is that more of a sin than eating pork, or less of a sin? Just as an example, and pork is the well-known one, but there's a lot of dietary laws besides pork. And it wasn't because it was unhealthy or unclean. It's because we were told not to eat it, along with shellfish and a whole long list of things. And it just happens to be that a lot of the things we were told turned out to be very good health-wise not to do. So maybe there was a divine intervention of some sort.
So channeling of nutrition information.
So Hannukah is 8 days. It's a festival, so it's not a sad holiday. It's a festival. We play games. There's actually, people may know of a dreidel, which is a four-sided spinning top toy, which has letters on it that talks about whether you take none. It's a gambling game, technically. Yeah. And so it's interesting when we talk to people about gambling and whatever, and people say, oh, you can't gamble, whatever. And I said, well, Hannukah talks, it's all about gambling. That's why there's the chocolate coins that people have, it's referred to as gelt. Is that the Yiddish term, or it's Hannukah gelt. I'm not sure whether gelt is Yiddish or Hebrew. It's German based. So therefore it's Yiddish. And it is used in that games quite often, that you'll use the money you put the money in, you spin, you either take none, you take some, or take all, and then the next person spins. And if you took half and they get to take all, then, so it's sort of like any type of poker game. We put an ante in and you sort of spin the dreidel and see who wins.
And I guess that there's a way that if it lands in a certain way, then you get either half of it or all of it or none of it.
Well, because
right?
it's a top that has sides, so it's going to have one side that's always going to be up, and so the letters on the four sides represent taking nothing, taking half, taking all of it. And I'm not sure what the other one refers to, but all the numbers have numerical value. So all the letters have numerical value. So it's that's how it's related. So,
and just so everybody's wondering, Randy's wife also is kind of in the background. If you're hearing a third voice.
A third voice. It's not divine spirit.
It's not spirit, guys.
Although it can be. So it's also a gift-giving holiday. So my children growing up, traditionally, I tried to do where they got a gift every night. So that rather than one main gift, and sometimes some years it was that there was a main gift, but quite often it was something smaller and it was something every night. And some people may want to know why is Hannukah always at a different time of year? The Jewish calendar follows the lunar calendar versus the Gregorian calendar, which is the Roman calendar that is the common base around the world that people use with the 12 months, etc. So the Jewish calendar is different. It follows the lunar cycle, so it shifts, it moves slowly each year, and then rather than a leap day once every 4 years that the Gregorian calendar has, the Jewish calendar has a leap month
Mm.
every, I believe, 7 years, so that it then realigns to the lunar cycle, to the seasons, the proper seasons.
A
So
whole
that's
month.
why it
That's it.
jumps
Like,
around.
that's just amazing to me. A whole month. By the way, we're just gonna, add in a month.
Yeah, well, it kind of works. Well, because it works with the lunar cycle, so
Yeah.
it works.
So just so people have reference for 2023, Hanukkah starts tomorrow, December 7th, and that'll run till the December 15th,
Actually, it starts Friday
right?
night. It
Oh, it starts
starts
Friday
Friday night.
night. Okay.
Friday night.
So Friday
So
night.
I was actually going to bring that up because a lot of people get confused. Most Gregorian calendars, Christian
Yeah,
calendars, have the Jewish holidays on there, and they usually put the day that it starts. But the
right.
Jewish day starts the evening before,
Evening
the
before.
nighttime. So that's why, like, our Sabbath starts Friday night to Saturday night. Our
Right.
day is from nightfall to the
Hmm.
next nightfall. So although the first day is Saturday, the first candle's lit Friday night,
Got it. Got it. So that's
and it
just
goes
how
through.
it'll run. So the 8th, yeah, I'm sorry about the date. So the
Yeah,
8th to the 15th. And then with this, with the lighting and the gifts, and actually had a experience when I was younger. My parents took us to a home where they happened to be Jewish. They happened to be celebrating Hanukkah that night. And so it was really beautiful. They were lighting the menorah, and then the child, he got a gift to open, and they were all excited about it. And it seems like it's such a beautiful family holiday, but it's that sense of, here it is, it's sundown, right? So there's that idea of the darkness coming on, but here we light the candle, and during that time, it's my understanding that you don't do anything else but be in that space of prayer and joy and the miracle of that, and that you don't use the light of the menorah for, let's say, doing work, or like there's a sacredness to the light that is being experienced. Would that be correct?
that's correct. It goes in line with the candles that we light at the beginning of the Sabbath. They're
Mm-hmm.
never extinguished. You don't put them out; they have to burn out. Um, and I'll bring up that being that it's 8 days long, the Orthodox will not do any work in the first 2 days or the last 2 days. Those are the
Mm-hmm.
days where the succession of work should not happen.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so goes in line with, you don't use the candle for work.
Mm-hmm.
It's meant to, it has a purpose, and
Right.
only one purpose. You don't light other candles from it. You don't now, the like a lot of things, there's always exceptions. It's like, you're not, an Orthodox Jew is not supposed to work on the weekends, and not supposed to travel, take vehicles or whatever. Those, we could spend a whole show just on that. But in the medical emergency, that all goes out the window.
Right.
The protection of life goes out the window. So if that Orthodox Jew was a surgeon, and they came to him personally and said, there's this person, and it doesn't matter whether they're Jewish or not, there's a patient, you have to save their life, they need the surgery right now, they're obligated to go and do that. And it's
Mm.
sort of, I also want to bring up why the family invited you during Hanukkah. There is, I can't think of a Jewish holiday or celebration where inviting the stranger or the non-Jew isn't encouraged. It is
Right.
always encouraged.
Right.
Quite often people are for Passover, which is in April usually. The exit, remembering the Exodus of Egypt. The It is actually, it's a mitzvot. It's a blessing to bring in a stranger and invite a person to your table, whether
Yeah.
they be Jewish or not.
There's that lovely story of the uninvited guest.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
So it's
That's part of Judaism, and part of that understanding of, you give what you have during those times.
and it's interesting. Not everybody really fully gets this. A lot of our prayers and a lot of our very sacred holidays and our Torah and our mitzvot all have rules about how to that the stranger among you, the whatever phrase you want to use, the non-Jewish person and your workers, your slaves, or whatever, all are equal, and they have a position. They are equal in front of the Jewish courts. They are equal. They were equal in all ways. And there's actually in some of those 613 commandments I talked about, it talks about, back then it was, you had to pay your servant at the day that they worked. You don't withhold their wages. It was every day you paid them. And so a lot of what is considered common law or laws and things have all derived from the Jewish text and laws, the Jewish laws, and that have formed our Western society and a lot of societies around the world, not all, but many. And I find it very interesting that when you dive in and read these things, you go, wow, some of it is just common sense, but it's what was the direction. But I wanted to focus on how the stranger amongst you, the whatever is, it's like the farmer, because it was where they were agricultural society, you weren't supposed to harvest the corner of your fields so the people who didn't have money, the poor, could have some of your crop.
Oh,
So it's those types of things are all built into it. So you take care of the poor, you give tzedakah, which is the charity, and when you give to charity, it's actually better if you do it anonymously. You're not supposed to take the credit for it. You're supposed to just give it for the sake of giving, because it's the right thing to do. So it's now, does everybody follow that? No, but it's something that both my wife and I try to do, and we've also tried to instill in our children to do.
To be of that generous spirit. And so just to make this accessible to people who don't necessarily come from the tradition of Judaism and that understanding, if they wanted to light a candle for Hanukkah, would that be appropriate for them to do?
I don't think there's nothing in Jewish text that says they can't. So here's where you get the
down. No.
Here's where you get the debates in. I'm sure you'll find Orthodox rabbis that say no, that's blasphemy, they're whatever. I take the position that it's no different than me going to a Christmas function to help celebrate with my Christian friends and honor their religion and their choice. I think if someone wants to do something to honor my religion, I'm all for it. And if you're doing something to honor Buddhism, if you're doing something to honor Christianity, you're doing something to honor any religion if it's coming from the heart, then of peace and of understanding. It brings me to a thought that I raised my children on using the word acceptance, not tolerance. And I hear people say, well, that's okay. We use tolerance. And I don't like the word tolerance, because tolerance means to put up with. I like the word acceptance. Acceptance means we may be different, but I accept who you are and what you stand for, and just I accept it. We may be different, we may have a different opinion, but I accept you for who you are and your opinion, whether it be religious, whether it be political view, whether it be whatever. So
there's a different energy and tension with those two words. They're very distinctly different. Tolerate means
yeah. Well, I use the phrase put up with. Right?
Okay, it's an irritation. The irritation is very there during toleration. But acceptance means, yes, I can be in your presence, accept your viewpoint, accept who you are, and be in that space of the divine. I see the divine in you.
Yes. It's like the namaste. May the God, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I guess you sort of wanted to touch on it, and maybe we'll do it even more later, but you can see how, for those who follow spiritualism, how this can integrate very, very well. I've been meaning to do, I've had friends say, why don't you post on Facebook? And I say, well, we'll take multiple posts of how spiritualism fits with your Judaism.
Yes.
And I've been asked that for years, ever since we started coming to Lilydale in 2012, and we didn't really get involved until 2013 and 14. and someone's biting their tongue across the table from me. And because it's all her fault, though.
Of course, of course.
Of course. And we can discuss it later if you'd like, of how I really feel it really dovetails together. It has its quirks sometimes, but
Yes.
so
Well, I think that there'll be an interesting part of this. And if there's anything else about the Hanukkah tradition that you think would be important for people to know before we dive into that other aspect.
No, I think it's the only thing that comes to mind is, you see these posts on Facebook. Yeah, I'm on Facebook a lot. That says, why Happy Holidays versus Merry Christmas? And because I grew up in the secular community, I wasn't in the Jewish community growing up. I did go to Sunday school. My parents drove me across town. I was generally the only Jewish kid in school most of the time, and then if I was lucky, there was a teacher or two. Where was I with
Happy holidays.
Happy Holidays. You see that post that says there's something like 30 some odd holidays between the 1st of December and the middle of January, between all the different religions and organizations in the world. Mm-hmm. So when you're saying happy holidays, it's not diminishing Christmas, it's about being inclusive. So if you're not sure, happy holidays is a little bit better. How do I feel when someone wishes me Merry Christmas? I don't take offense to it. They assume, and I just take it. There are people who there's so many things we could be offended in our life. That's not one of them I'm going to get offended on. Because what was the person's intent?
Joyous sharing. Yeah.
It was sharing about the holiday, the joy, happy times, and may this time of the season be happy for you. Yes. Is what we were saying, right? Mm-hmm. And mm-hmm. It's because in the secular world, Merry Christmas has been the mainstay for years. And I'm okay. It doesn't bother me because that was the intent. Now, if they know I'm Jewish and they purposely say it because they want to push the Christmas part of it, the Christ part of it onto me, then I would, and I think on one hand I could count the number of times that I have felt that way when someone has said that in my 60 plus years on this earth. Mm-hmm. So it's
true rarity. Yeah.
I don't take offense by what the odd person does. I will take offense by what the majority does. And it's the majority is the intention of that goodwill and peace.
Yeah, goodwill to men.
All the things that Christmas stands for.
Yeah.
In that manner, I fully agree with. So
beautiful. So, and just to lean in briefly about the Festival of Lights, because there's that sense of the light coming to earth and the light within us at the same time. And the light that comes to the earth is a seasonal change that's happening. All through December, more and more light is coming into our world and in our consciousness, even though it's a dark time. I mean, it gets dark by 5 o'clock now. Yes. And I'm just like, oh, where is the sun? But it's the season that we do relate with Hannukah, is that joyous time. That's not just Christmas for you. It's a joyous time of light. And even the Niagara Falls, they get lit up for the Festival of Lights. They put all these little colored lights on things and make it fun.
Yeah. So interesting that you Judaism refers to the soul as the spark of light that God puts into the baby at the time of birth. That's yes. Judaism believes that occurs at the time of birth when that first breath is taken. So that's a whole other subject we don't want to dive into. It's a political nightmare right now, especially in the US. So it's interesting that you use the term light, and when I've taken courses by rabbis, some Orthodox rabbis, they refer to that spark of light that God puts into the soul. Mm-hmm. And here we have the Festival of Lights, and I believe there's a couple of other religions that refer to this time of year as the Festival of yes. Lights as well. Mm-hmm. Some of the Hindu ones and whatever. So it's interesting how Christmas has the Christmas lights and all the lighting, and Judaism has the lights, and how it's all this time of year. I think because it's also the darkest time of year for the northern hemisphere, at least.
Yes.
So it's just an interesting little tie to that, and then how that spark of light, spiritualism considers that the light energy, that the mediumship that we get it's this light that we quite often see, and how movies have focused in on death and near death experiences being, either go to the light or don't go to the light, depending on the movie. And
that's right. That's right.
It's which came first, the chicken or the egg type of thing. Do the movies do that because of I'll generalize a little. A lot of the older movies that did that, Hollywood is very Jewish based, and a lot of it's funny, a little bit of political, the boycott, divest. Most of the major traditional Christian songs are all written by Jewish people, interestingly enough. So it's
I've read about that too. It's hilarious.
Which goes to show that it's about bringing the light and joy to everyone, not just to ourselves. I
wanted to share with folks, as I mentioned to you, I have this book, The Family Treasury of Jewish Holidays by Melka Drucker. And when I said I have this book, you said you have it too. And would you say that's a pretty good reference for people who want to know more about Jewish holidays as a whole, not just Hannukah?
Yeah, and I believe, if I remember correctly, because I haven't looked at that lately, it's written at the level that you can read to children, but also like a lot of movies, they're geared to children, but there's a lot of adult stuff in there. So it was done. Like this one. Yeah, so it was done to. There's several books like that with the idea that it's to educate.
Yes, and I wanted to share with you what you thought, because it says that the first blessing over the Hannukah candles, if I could just read this sentence to you, because I think it's really to me as a spiritualist, when I read this, I resonate with it so strongly. You abound in blessings, source of light, our God, ruler of all worlds, who has made us holy with your commandments and has commanded us to kindle the light of Hannukah. So there's that physical light of Hannukah, but there is that spiritual light of Hannukah that is so beautiful. And then they say the second blessing gives thanks for the miracles. You abound in blessings, source of all, our God, ruler of the universe. So keeping that titling at the beginning, who performed miracles for our ancestors in those days at this time. And there seems to be that acceptance that there'll be more miracles. Because you've done it before, we know you could do it again. And that seems to be part of the Hannukah tradition as well, that the miracles continue.
Yeah, that first part of the prayer that you talked about, that you love, is actually the first part of all of our prayers.
See, there we go.
So, it's the Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. That's that part. That's the Hebrew.
They have it right there. Yep, you said it just right.
I should. No book, no notes. That's the beginning part of every prayer. So it brings, so you can see how there's you don't have to put a lot of dots between that and spiritualism.
Yes.
Okay. There's a few conflicts in spiritualism, which some people struggle with, but I don't have an issue with them. And again, it would be the Orthodox Jews that would have a major issue with them.
Sure.
The conservatives maybe, and Reform don't care.
There's a different blessing that you do, let's say, for Shabbat, the Sabbath, versus the blessings you would do during Hannukah time. And would you say there's a building of the energy each night? There's a building of the energy of of remembrance, but also that connection to the divine during those times.
I don't think it's structured to, but it does. You
Okay.
you can't help but see when all 8 candles plus the extra one are all lit and providing that light. Now, people don't know, I'm in a second marriage as a blended family. So when we had all 5 of our children, my 3 children and my wife's 3 children, they're all my children. When they were together, we had a Hannukah for everyone. Tamarishka and I had our own, but we had one for each of the kids, so they would learn the practice. They had one, so when they went out on their own, they had one, but they could light it.
Yes.
And there's also eliminated the fights of who got to light candles.
Well, they say that you usually you want each night one a different member of the family gets to light it.
That's a traditional thing, not a law.
But for practical purposes, you were like, everybody gets their own.
So you can imagine we had this island with, we had 6 Hannukahs out, and on the 8th night, all of them had like 9 candles burning, and the rest of the lights were out in the house. It really, the energy that came from that, yes, it did build, because it just was. Now the kids weren't all there for all something. As they get a little older, they weren't there for the whole thing. Sure. But when they were, it was so. To answer your question, I felt an energy build with it.
Yes.
And I can
the magnification of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because there's this building towards getting all of them lit. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And then also knowing that symbolically, even if you feel like you're on the last drop of oil, the last drop of something of energy that you have within yourself, that you can sustain beyond that moment. That's what I take from it too, that you sustain beyond just that moment, that you may even be able to extend another 8 days or years or whatever time frame it is that you need to get through a circumstance too. So there's a hardiness to that I appreciate, and that digging deep for the spirit and a remembrance to take that into other times at different points of the year, not just during Hanukkah.
It's funny. My business life, and I like to use analogies and stories to go with it. And it's that endurance and things that you talked about. I just saw, I've seen it before, but a study where they put mice into water.
Yeah, I saw that one too.
And just before they gave up and drowned, they picked the mice up, took them out, let them recover, like for an hour. Then they put them right back into it again. Mm-hmm. And rather than, and they only lasted like 15 minutes the first time, and they did days afterwards.
Yeah.
And why were they able to push? And the study showed that because they knew that they would be rescued, their body was able to go beyond the normal endurance because they knew that they were going to be rescued.
Yeah.
And I
there's
think
a psychology to that.
It ties into just what you were talking about, is that when we, and why does the mother have, when a child's in danger, have the ability to pick up a car, like lift up the end of a car type of thing, that adrenaline flow, that thing that, and there's no answer for it other than because, right? And that's what all, I think, religion requires is that bit of that leap of faith.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And, that's where that leap of faith becomes with belief.
So what are some other connections that you feel Judaism and spiritualism have with each other?
Oh, I think it goes to how can you be Jewish and believe in spiritualism? Well, if you go down the principles of spiritualism, mm-hmm. they tie to the 10 Commandments, they tie to those other 600 and change, 601 of the one I like the most, or the two that I like the most is actions create results according to natural law. Mm-hmm. In other words, mm-hmm. we're and actions, the one right after that one, sorry, my mind's gone blank. But that primary one is the ones that I like that our actions, to me, that means we're accountable for our actions. And because we're accountable for our own actions, whatever occurs from them is natural. Mm-hmm. So that's what spiritualism believes, but so does Judaism. Judaism believes in responsibilities, because it talks about honoring parents and all those are all responsibilities. And it lists out all these things that we should do or shouldn't do because there's consequences. Now, the Orthodox would say it's consequences because of how God's going to feel. I think there's consequences in our life that happens. And so nothing, because there's no dogma with spiritualism that says you shall not, you shall or shall not do these things. It's not telling me to do anything different than what my Judaism does. So I guess the only real conflict comes in the connection to the spirit world. And I have an argument. Go figure, a Jew has the argument for something. And I've always said my whole life, you want to have a debate, tell me which side you want. I can always argue either side of anything. So some of those commandments talk about not talking with spirits. And depending on whose interpretation you read, some say you shouldn't ever, and others say you can if it's for good. But I just look back at the Bible, which is a book written by man, supposedly divinely inspired, or that's a whole argument on its own. But let's look at some of the stories in there. I like going to Joseph and his amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. He interpreted dreams.
That's right.
Is that not a form of spiritualism? Yes, it is. There in the ancient times, no country ever went to war without a soothsayer telling them what to do and what not to do.
Yep.
Now, some people will say that's into the Wicca world and the paganism, but the reality is, no, spiritualism and mediumship is not fortune telling. And mediumship tells you possibilities. And I look at what some of those soothsayers and things told them for war. They weren't always accurate, right? Usually got them killed, but they weren't always accurate because they told of possibilities. And most kings and generals that went to them wanted to know possibilities so that they were prepared in the battlefield. So it's interesting how history has always had these. Christianity has them. Judaism has it in the Kabbalah, which supposedly only certain high priests are allowed to be educated and learn and do. But that's been blown out of the water by Reform Judaism and the rest of the world. And so Kabbalah is the mystics, right? So like it's there, it's part of the religion.
Yes.
So I think some of the belief of it in my mind is, and this can be said of multiple religions, do as I say, not as I do. And anytime someone tells me to do as I say, not as I do, I don't really want to listen. So, and I've seen in our years being involved in Lilydale and spiritualism and mediumship around, I guess, Canada, United States. We've been in Israel and done it. My wife's been in the UK and done it. I've seen so much good come of it. And people who, I've always been a skeptic. And there's a very good medium in Lilydale who once told me, we love the skeptics because the skeptics keep us on our toes and they keep us honest.
Well, there's a difference between a healthy skeptic and someone who's just a...
Well, I've done a lecture once on skeptics versus non-believers. Skepticism it was on. And it's the non-believers that are the problem. Those are the people that no matter how much truth is put in front of them, they will never change their mind. So they just tolerate us, to go back to our other term. So I've seen mediums, and I've watched mediums work and give message and details to people that there's no way they ever could have known other than connecting with someone from the afterlife. So when that's happened, and verified by the person who's been receiving the message, how can you not believe? And then when I was beginning, I've had those deja vu moments in my life. I've had things where totally unexplainable, where I've known something that was I should never have known. So I've formed my own opinions on how that interrelates with reincarnation and all of the different things that people want to throw. They ask me my opinion of, and I give it. I give what I think is a logical potential explanation based on my beliefs and my understanding of that spark of light that see, Judaism believes that spark of light is put into the child, and then at death it goes back.
And where does it go after death?
Well, there's no explanation. It goes to the ether, right? It goes back to God. Okay. So what's not discussed in Judaism is whether that spark is put back into another person or not. So reincarnate, people who believe in reincarnation believe that goes back into another soul at a later time. I don't know. It's possible, but I think that if Einstein's spark is there in the spirit world and never comes back, what if someone's baby's spark is befriended by him and spends time with him and is therefore more intelligent when it comes to this world? So that's why you can pull someone out of the African jungle who's a math genius, who's never had a day of school. How Beethoven can write his first symphony at age 4.
Yes.
You know, how those things happen.
Genius savants. Yeah.
In the savants and everything. So, or how someone can wind up having a singing voice of an opera person at age 7, right? Type of thing that we see on America's Got Talent or whatever. Or, you know, whatever those shows. These kids come up with these voices and these talents.
Phenomenal.
So
I had a quick question about whether spiritual healing you felt was in place in Judaism and had a place there at all.
Well, it's a good question. It's something I really never. Well, first of all, the one thing although I can do mediumship. Healing is my forte. So, and it's not me. I'm just a conduit.
Right.
Okay. So in spiritualism, the hands-on healing that we do it's not. We're not doing it. We're just a conduit. Just like the medium isn't the dead person. They're just a conduit from the spirit world to this world. So where does it fit into Judaism? Well, I don't know. What comes to mind is I'm going to upset some people with this. Jesus was known as a healer and a prophet. Judaism acknowledges him as a healer and a prophet. The only thing we don't recognize him as the Messiah. So if he was a healer and a prophet who was Jewish some 2,000 years ago, he was a Jewish person that was a healer.
Yes.
So I would say Judaism does have healing in it, and we actually have prayers for healing. So it's called the Mishabera. You can look it up, and it talks. It's the prayer is the one that we sing in our synagogue that I still belong to. It's half in English and half in Hebrew, and it's about giving healing to those who need it. And similar to what I always bring when I do a healing prayer of any sort, is not only for those who need it, but for those who don't know to ask for healing. In my mind, they need it just as much. Because if you know you need healing, you're probably going to find ways to get that healing. But there's people that don't know how to ask. And Judaism brings up that don't know how to ask in other holidays as well. You can read the story of Passover. It talks about the 4 children. The one who does not even know how to ask. Okay, so there's always that circular theme of healing, of helping, and for those who don't know. So, so to answer the question short, I believe Judaism does. I just haven't dived into.
It's not something that's talked about in, let's say, the normal Jewish culture. Maybe in, the Kabbalah, that sort of thing. They might touch a bit more about that sort of.
They might. The only healing in Judaism I know of is the prayer for the healing, and similar to spiritualist churches where you can, usually the rabbi who leads the prayer will ask if there's anybody that has a name that they don't want to put on the healing list.
And the healing list. Yeah, everybody has a healing list.
So there it is. So so I guess Judaism believes that prayer can provide that healing and thinking of that person healing. So it's not a big leap to believe that Judaism believes that we can mentally send out healing to people. So is it something that's taught and whatever? No, it isn't, but it is part of the religion, and maybe something for me to look into a little deeper.
Yeah, I think it'd be fascinating to just get some more of those connections. I know we just have a little time left. Are there any other thoughts of connections between spiritualism and Judaism that you think would be great to share with people today?
Well, I've got to put a plug in there for this place in the picture here.
Yes.
The Oaks, it's been renamed the Oaks B&B Hotel and Spiritual Center in Jamestown, New York. My wife and I purchased that building earlier this year, and it's a 10-room bed and breakfast that is geared around spiritualism and having a quiet. There's a meditation room. There's quiet times. It's and the local Jewish community spends time in our building as well. So we've gotten involved with them. But they don't have a problem with the spiritualism, and
right.
And we're trying to create because my form of spiritualism is non-denominational. So there may be some people who are on here who belong to a spiritualist church. That is because there are Christian-based spiritualist churches. So where they actually have the Bible up on the platform and open all the time, and that's okay. That's their right to have. But people who have maybe gone to that type and never been to another type need to understand that there are a lot that are very non-denominational, meaning that there is no religion background, and that's the type of facility that we try to run there. And we're trying to encourage it to be that type of facility, and where we're doing have a meeting room where we have availability for workshops and retreats and seminars and things like that. So got to put the plug in there.
Yes.
theoaksbnb.com.
There you go. There you go.
And so
that's a community connection point that you're making with that, and it's a good one. And then in terms of some other connection points with spiritualism and Judaism, what I find, and of course, correct me if I'm wrong, but I find there's that connection with the light, the connection with the source of all, and whereas a spiritualist might say infinite intelligence, it doesn't seem too far off the mark that Judaism, someone of the Jewish faith, would also see that as infinite intelligence. The source of all. That would
in Judaism. In Judaism, you don't actually say the proper name of God. There's actually, I believe, 12 different names for referencing God. The actual true name.
Dance around it.
You dance around it because you're not supposed to say it when you write. An Orthodox Jew, if they write the word God, the G-O-D, they won't put the O. They'll put a dash in because you're not supposed to write the name of God. So, where I have a problem with that is using something different but meaning which, like, if you mean God, say God, right? It's like sorry, I'm gonna take a little shot at here. Christianity says put no other God before me, but then Christianity has this hierarchy of these people that you're supposed to bow down to and honor before God. So, to me, it's a little bit of an oxymoron in that you believe this, but then go ahead and do this. And that is why a rabbi in the Jewish community, the true definition of the word rabbi is a learned person. Okay. Now, do we have ordinations for our rabbis and that? Because we want to make sure that they're learned to the level that we want, depending on the level of the type of Judaism. But anyone can be a rabbi, and that's why you see Jesus was referred to as a rabbi. was
Yes.
because he was a learned person. He was a prophet. He was a healer. He was teaching. So it's a learned person, a teacher is
Mhm.
is the true definition of a rabbi. So I see that sort of in spiritualism too, is that there's the learned person has the ability to, we're in Lilydale and our summer season, we bring lots of different learned people in from a variety of different things, sometimes controversial. And it's for the betterment and the enlightenment. There's that word, enlightenment. Um, I see your family's probably in the background there. It's that enlightenment comes back again. So ties to Judaism, I think, are deep, and if we probably spent more time, we could find more and more and more. And
Sure.
but I think you can do that in other religions as well. So it's
Hmm.
not exclusive to Judaism either. So
Yes.
it's
Well, it's always fascinating because I comparative religion is something I really enjoy, looking at the differences, the similarities, seeing where things connect and merge, and allowing for all of it to take place. But also it helps me to refine my own understanding, um, internally and externally, because there's that experience that's going on. And I think it's so beautiful what you've been able to share with us today
my
about
pleasure.
this topic, and about Hanukkah, and how we can bring a bit more light to our lives during this holiday season. And over the eight, well, Adam Sandler says eight crazy nights.
Nice. Yes,
that that we can just be in that remembrance of our own souls during this time, so that when we light a candle, whether it's in an official menorah or not, uh, that we light the candle within ourselves, that we ignite the soul to do powerful and miraculous things during this time of year and all year round.
absolutely. And
Yeah,
you know what? If you want to know more, I tell people, if you want to know more, reach out to a Jewish friend.
there you
Ask,
go.
invite yourself. They will probably not say no.
Hey,
Um,
Randy.
you got to come up here though.
Yes, you're way up north right now.
Oh yeah, 3 hours away.
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate you sharing about this, and helping people understand about the Festival of Lights, and about a spiritual journey that they may want to explore for themselves as well. Thank you so much for being here today. And everyone, I'll see you next week for another great show of Wednesdays with Will. I'll have Mark Thomas on, and we are going to be talking about meditation through the ages. And Mark is well versed in meditation, and he's going to talk about different forms. And perhaps it'll be a defining moment for you to find the meditation technique or modality that is best for you. All right, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Have a beautiful day. Bye bye.